Hi everyone, this is Mr. Robotic Warfare, and welcome back to episode 3 of Auto Terraformacraft. So at the end of last episode, we had just completed making our bed, and now it is time to tackle the next pressing issue, which is food. So I'm going to go ahead and clear a little bit of space here right over by the water, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn all of this into farmland. Now farmland works a little bit different in Terraformacraft. You still need a hoe to make it, so I'm going to remember how to make one of those hoe heads really fast. Thankfully, you can just make it out of some stone. But the idea in Terraformacraft is that you have lots of different kinds of foods, as we've already seen, but they each require a different condition in which to grow. So the two main conditions that are relevant for right now are the temperature, the ambient temperature, as well as the hydration value of the soil that we place it on. So you can see that I'm going to start tilling here by the water, and you'll see hydration 100% because it's right next to a water source. This will drop off. You see there some of them have 83, as well as 63, 43, all the way down to 23. Now, the cool thing is that the farmland will not get trampled, so I can just kind of walk over it, and I can be happy with that. But now I'm going to need to grab all of my seeds and find some configuration on these tiles to make sure that everything has its hydration and its temperature requirements satisfied. I can't directly affect the temperature right now. That just has to do with the time of year. So I'm going to do my very best to plant these at a reasonable time. And right now we've got a pretty good window to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and grab all of the seeds that I can and try and find some way to plant them down. So you can see here the temperature, or rather the hydration for the seeds that I just planted is too high. It needs to be less than 75%. So I'm going to need to eventually move those around and find a different place for them a little bit further away. So you can see I've got all of these seeds to take care of, and with a little bit of doing, I go ahead and come up with this layout right here. It's a little bit haphazard, but it should hit most of the things that I need, and no food is better, or excuse me, some food is better than no food. And we are very quickly heading into the no food route because the meat that we grabbed while we made our way over here is going to expire pretty soon. In the meantime, though, I need something to eat. So I'm going to go ahead and take the grain that I had collected over my scavenging and actually cut it down into the actual grain itself. So you can see that we've got the actual oats, and then we're turning it into oat grains, etc. You can directly eat the grain. It's not particularly nutritious, but it's better than nothing. And it gives a byproduct of straw. Our larger clay pots here are also done, our large vessels. So we're going to go ahead and stick these down so we can move our food from the chest into these clay vessels, because these seal, which not only preserves the food for longer, but it also prevents rats from coming to get it. So if you have food out in chests or open vessels, there are rats that spawn that will come steal it. So we're just going to go ahead and grab all of the big important stuff here, including some of the meat that's not spoiled, and we will go ahead and just start organizing this into these vessels. And it's not going to be a super complicated thing. I'll just kind of roughly organize it, but you can see that after a while I can just stick all of these, seal them all, and we'll be good to go. After a little bit of inventory cleaning, the next thing to do is to remake the forge that we had set up a couple episodes ago. So again, to make the forge, you need basically a charcoal block surrounded on 5 sides by some kind of stone. In this case, we'll be using cobble, and then the top of the block has skylight access. Because really what we want to be doing is, now that we've been able to collect some more copper from that mine that we found, we want to actually turn this into some more tools so we can actually do more useful things, as well as start progressing through the different tiers. So I'm going to go ahead and stick down a couple of charcoal piles, hit it with the fire starter, and then we'll be good to go. So the forge is back, but now it's a question of getting what's needed to continue on. So the main thing that's needed to continue right now is twofold. The first is I need some flux, because that's eventually what's going to let me forge things into ingots and then double ingots, which will let me make anvils, which is how you progress through the different tiers. But the other thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need some bellows. And bellows are used to heat the forge up to a higher temperature than the base fuel can do as well. You can also see here that over the course of doing some of this stuff, we've had a pretty massive time skip, and our crops have grown. So we'll go ahead and take a second to harvest these. But the idea with the forge is that we want to be able to heat up things a little bit faster, as well as get things to a higher level of heat than they would be able to with just the base fuel. And for that we need bellows. And to get those bellows, we need some leather. So the other thing that we want to work on making here is leather. But in the meantime, we've got a nice yield of food here that's going to sustain me for quite some time. We can pick some of this stuff up. You can see here that the melons, you can kind of leave the stalks and they will keep growing melons just like in the base game. That's essentially what I was testing here. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. But there are some things that are going to take a little longer, but we can go ahead and just toss the rest of the stuff away. You can see that some of our cabbage has gone rotten here, but pretty much everything else is good to go. So we can put the rest of the stuff away, and then we can get back to working on stuff related to the forge. So I'm going to go ahead and start by making some more tool molds. First and foremost, we want to make that hammer, which is going to let us get the flux I was talking about. But then we're going to go ahead and also make some of the other tools that we've got. So here I'm making an axe, and then we're also going to want probably a shovel as well, if I can remember how to make one of those. There we go. And then the last thing we're going to grab is the tool that I didn't have the first time, which is a prospector's pick. And this is the tool that actually indicates to us where there is ore in the ground. So when you right-click on the ground, it'll give you an indication that says there's a rough amount of ore in this location, which is very, very helpful for finding ores so you don't have to do it blind like I did last time. So we'll go ahead and set all of these clay molds down. One of the other really nice things that we can use the bellows for is we can actually heat things hot enough to get them to get clay fired. So by default, you cannot put the clay molds into the forge and have them fired all the way. They're only going to get part of the way. But once we get those bellows, we're going to be able to fire them completely, which means that we'll basically no longer need to make pit kilns for any reason, which is going to be really nice. So you can see here that I've got some water, and the first step in making leather is making some lime water, which requires this flux, and the flux is gotten from hammering down either certain types of rocks or some sea creatures, which you saw briefly flash in the JAI there. So I'm going to need, at some point, to go take a trip out to the ocean and collect some of that stuff because I don't have the correct rock type around. But in the meantime, I can place down my piece of raw basalt, which I will be able to turn into my very first stone anvil once I get my hammer. So you can see that I'm back from my trip to the ocean. I've got my boat in the hotbar there, and we've got 11, I believe those are clams. And what we can do once we get our copper in here, you see I just chucked that in there. We can go ahead and get this heated up, and then our mold's just finished, so this is perfect timing. We're going to get this nice and hot, and then we're going to go ahead and pour all of those molds, and one of those things is going to give us a hammer, so we can actually go ahead and smash those clams down into some flux. So just a little bit of inventory management here. It's getting a little intense, but we can go ahead and grab this when it's nice and hot. Another little time skip, but we can go ahead and start pouring, and you can see I did not wait long enough because it just re-solidified. It was just molten. I need to wait till it's actually much hotter to actually get all of my molds off in one go. So I can go ahead and stock a little bit more fuel, and we will just wait now until we've got enough heat to actually pour the rest of these molds. Alright, now we've got it nice and hot. Yellow white is the hottest you can get with just the charcoal. So we're going to go ahead and finish pouring our axe mold, get the prospector's pick in there, and then we can just finish up all of these tool heads. And importantly, we can finish up that hammerhead, because that's going to let us, like I said, get that flux. Alright, now we've got all of those molds poured. We can save the rest of the charcoal that we didn't burn. Stick it back here for storage, and then we'll go ahead and chuck all of the hot molds into this little water. I am apparently standing on an underground lake, so it's kind of inconvenient for building things down beneath the base, but we'll figure that out as time goes on, I'm sure. So we're just going to wait till we hear the hissing sound stop. We can jump down, grab all of those molds, and you can see it's actually a pretty substantial water cave, but I can just go ahead and pop them all out. And then this is the time that I realize that I have barely any sticks left, so we just do the time mold strategy of trying to find some on the ground. And thankfully, we actually have 3 right next to each other here, and that's going to be enough to get all of our tools. Alright, so now we've got the tools ready. We can go ahead and take these clams and immediately smash them down, and there we go. We've got our first set of flux. So we want to go ahead and make some lime water, and it's 1 piece of flux per 500 millibuckets, or half a bucket of water. We've got 10 buckets, so we need 20, and you can see you don't even need to wait and seal it. It just immediately turns into lime water. So we can start the process of making leather, which starts by taking the hides that we've collected from killing animals and actually soaking them in the lime water so you can get those soaked hides. And we're going to be doing medium hides here. So we can go ahead and seal those and wait for those to get ready. But in the meantime, I'm going to need a lot of wood to kind of satisfy the coming tasks that I've got. I'm going to definitely need more charcoal for forging, as well as just more wood for crafting, and I'm basically out at this point. And I've got myself a brand spanking new axe, so I'm just going to grab a sip of water, make sure that my nutrition is topped off. And when I say nutrition, I mean hunger bar, because you can actually see my HP going down. But we'll solve the nutrition issue a little bit later. But we're going to go ahead and head over to the big forest that I had marked, because we are looking for these guys. These are 2 wide ash trees. They're 2 by 2, and they give an absolutely insane number of logs compared to just 1 tree. You can see they're all falling over the place here, and you can see there are some others in the background. So all I've got to do is really take down a couple of these guys, and very quickly you'll see I've got a completely full inventory of logs just from cutting down basically 3 or 4 trees. We're going to finish filling up the inventory with just some of these small logs, and that really should be good for now, so we can just go ahead and start heading back home. I'm going to take a little bit of a circuitous route, because one of the other things that I want to do is start searching for animals, especially horses, because those are going to make transport a lot easier. And you can see, thankfully, I have actually found some. So I picked up some wheat off the ground, or some oats. I can't really remember what kind it is. Oh, barley. There you go. So the barley grain is actually the thing that's used to move the horses around, just like wheat in the normal game. In this case, you actually need the grain itself. So I can, in situ, make myself a knife, doing some very poor inventory management here. But we can get some knife blades, and we'll just struggle a little bit here to get everything that we need. But we've got the horse right here. And find the blades that we dropped, make a knife, chuck the rest of it away. Not the wood, please. I need that. Okay, now we can go back, grab that piece of barley, chop it into grain, ditch the rest, and there we go. We've got something, and the horse will see it immediately. And you can see right here we've got a 2.41 jump and a 9.15 speed, which is not so great. But we're going to keep going ahead, and holy crap, 13.25 naturally spawning speed. That is incredibly fast. I think that the fastest is the same as it is in vanilla, so 14.2 something. So to find this fast of a horse just immediately is really, really great. It means that we're going to have a much easier time with travel. And even then, look at this. There's also a stallion right here. So now we've actually got a breeding pair of horses. We've got a stallion and a mare. You can see that I kind of ditched the slower horse, because now that we've got this breeding pair, this is really all we're going to need. And we're going to be riding the fast horse around as our main source of transportation for hours and hours to come. So I'll get these guys a nice proper pen eventually, but for now, they just get a little hole in the ground, as one does. And I have neglected to empty my inventory from the logs yet. So this is still going to be a little bit of a tricky inventory management operations, but I can go ahead and find these 2 guys. You can see that she comes running real fast back. We can try and get the stallion in here as well. He's kind of a big dumb lug, so he stopped paying attention. Let's try and get him back over here. Come on, buddy. All right, there we go. So horses acquired, and now we can go ahead and just set down the rest of the logs that I got here, just to have some extra storage for when I'm going to need them. Definitely going to turn into some charcoal, but for now, nice big chunk of wood. Not going to need to go get more of that for a little bit. Going to top off the water, and then we can move on to some other tasks. The first thing that I want to do before I forget is I want to start familiarizing the horses. So once I have my leather, I can make a saddle, but the problem is that the horses, you can see there, have familiarity 0 and now to 6. You actually need to feed the animals once a day until you reach a high enough familiarity to actually ride them. So the familiarity threshold will also, so the familiarity will decay over time if you neglect to feed them. But once you get it to a threshold of 35, then they'll actually stick around for a while, and you won't have to continuously do that. So I believe it's 18 that's required to get them up to the point where they can be ridden, but we're just going to start doing that slowly over time. We also see that our soaked hides have finished in our lime water, so we can go ahead and put the soaked hides down on like a log or some other block here, and just use a knife to actually scrape off the scum. You can see that I made some other knives here, and you basically just have to hit all of these little pixels until it turns all the way to a scraped hide. You can see I did all 8 there. And from these scraped hides, we can then soak them in just water. That gets us a prepared hide. And then we do the last step of getting it soaked in tannin to get our leather. Now, these chestnut logs that you see here are actually what's used to make tannin. You can just drop some chestnut logs into a barrel of water. There are a couple of other valid lumber types as well, but basically just wood plus the water makes the tannin. Now you can see here, I'm trying to fill this barrel. You can fill barrels directly. You just have to be placing it against a block, which I will find out shortly here. But once you basically place it against a block inside a source, then you can actually pick it up. So now we've got another barrel full of water because we've already converted that one on the right into tannin. So now we've got our medium prepared hide, and we can now just wait for that to get done so we can start working on our leather. Do some more quick inventory management here. But in the meantime, we're going to grab a little bit more wood so that we can begin crafting some supports. And we want supports here again because we are going to plan another mining trip. We found just enough copper to get started, but we're going to need to start collecting some other metals. And I think the first thing that I'm going to opt to do is I'm going to break out my prospector's pick, and I'm going to go chase down another ore type here and see what I can find. So ideally, I'm going to head over for this bismuth vein that I saw while I was walking over here, because bismuth plus copper plus another ore is going to allow us to make some bismuth bronze, which is a tier of metal higher than copper. So once we get our copper tools and make a copper anvil, we can then start working on making bismuth bronze. So you can see now I'm actually using my prospector's pick here. You can see it told me that I found traces of bismuthinite, and I'm going to basically just kind of localize it and see if I can get any higher readings. None so far, but you can see that I do find another piece of ore here. I've got more traces, so I can kind of roughly triangulate to where I want that to be. So I can do the same thing as last time, though a little bit better informed this time. Just dig poke holes, trying to figure out where I'm at, and I'm now realizing I forgot to bring ladders, which is kind of important, but that's okay. We're going to keep going, and eventually we will find the bismuth that we're looking for. So now I have the tricky task of, since I got here from the top, I need to now figure out a decent way to get the supports in without caving everything in on myself. So I've got the supports at the ready, but the problem is that everything is gravel here. So if I break the gravel and place the support, it does not work like vanilla. The support just gets broken. So I need to dig down actually a little bit more and try and find a way to get these supported. I risk a cave-in, and obviously cave-ins are not good for a number of reasons. First of all, they're very, very dangerous because in this game, you don't drop your items on death. They get put into a gravestone, which is nice. However, the gravestone can get crushed by falling rocks, and then you actually lose all your stuff. So you can see here I'm going to try and widen a little bit of an area for the supports, but unfortunately I caused a cave-in. And you can actually see the other effect of a cave-in there, which is that if you cave in rocks onto a vein of ore, the ore blocks actually have a chance to decrease in quality. So there are 3 variants of ore. We talked about this last time. We've got rich, normal, and poor. So let's say that you've got a piece of rich ore and you have a cave-in that's triggered and it falls on top of one of those rich pieces of ore. That can actually turn into normal or poor as some probabilistic chance. So now, speaking of probability and chances, I'm going to really take a big chance here by trying to dig out just enough so that I can get a set of supports down so I can at least get my start here. It's looking like this is going to be a pretty big vein, which is fantastic because I really don't want to have to go get bismuth more than once. But I can kind of set up the initial thing here, and then once we've got that horizontal support down, we are good to go. We can start digging out a little bit, and I'm realizing now that I'm still surrounded by gravel, so I have to do this kind of carefully. What I'm going to opt to do is make a little hole next to the support here. And thankfully, once you've got the rocks removed, you can break the support, and that's not going to cause an update or anything that will recave it in. But I can just go ahead and hop down here now. Put the support back, remove the excess, and then I can get to mining. So I'm going to grab as much of this stuff as I can, and I'm just going to try and clear out as much of the vein as I can, or until my pickaxe breaks, whichever one comes first. And you can see after a whole ton of mining here, hollowing out quite a big area, my pickaxe is just on the verge of breaking, and I say, you know what, we'll just go until it breaks. So one more piece of ore there, and bam, we're done. So taking a look at our yield, we've got a number of stacks of bismuth. We've also got some of those vessels full as well, so we have plenty of stuff to work with, including a decent amount of rich, a lot of poor, but then some normal as well. And we've got some of the other rich stuff put away there. So now I'm remembering again that I forgot to bring ladders. So it's going to be a little bit of a tall order to get out of here. But through the use of movie magic, we're just going to skip all of that. And we're going to go right to when I am headed back home. So magic aside, we are now back home. We've got lots of bismuth to our name now. Find somewhere to put that. Also want to make sure that we continue familiarizing the animals. And you can see here now we've got the achievement for best friends, or rather the advancement, because it says may be ridden now. So we've got them just to the minimum level of familiarity that they can be ridden. So as soon as my leather is done, I can go ahead and make a saddle, and then we'll really be off to the races. Pun fully intended. Speaking of which, we can see that our leather is done soaking. So we've got the prepared hides. The last step is to go ahead and jam them into that barrel of tannin. And in a short amount of time, we will be greeted with our leather. But that's going to be it for today. We've got a lot done. We've got our forge set up and ready to go. We've got our leather soaking in tannin. And we'll continue next time.